So, I guess formally, welcome to the grand finals of the 2019 World Individual Debating and Public Speaking Championships. Here we are. Congratulations again to everybody who made it into this competition and then all the way to finals and through even now to grand finals. It's an amazing accomplishment. We're so excited. It's going to be such a treat to see such incredible speeches today. I just want to give some notes about the details of the grand finals, just logistics, so that everyone feels settled and understands the proceedings and how they're going to go. So first of all, in front of me here at this unoccupied table, that's the judges' table. So each event will have different judges, and that's why the judges, we've asked you to sit in the front so that you can, without too much encumbrance, make it to the table when it's time for your category. The 5 categories in order will be interpretive reading, impromptu speaking, persuasive speaking, after dinner, and debating. So you can anticipate when it will be time. And our lovely moderators will remind you. They'll say things like, would the judges for this event come forward? Or the judges for this event are. But you can think in your head, interpretive, impromptu, persuasive, after dinner, and then debate. And there's the spot for you to go. Debaters, those of you in the debating final, your job is to meet me in the hall behind us after impromptu speaking. So before persuasive speaking. And that's when the debaters will prepare. Okay, so the debaters, before persuasive speaking begins, will meet me in the hall and will choose sides and motions and all that sort of business. As far as the stage setup goes, this is interpretive reading. So many interpretive readers choose to sit, so they have that option there. If an interpretive reader chooses to stand, they have that option here or in front of the lectern if they wish. After interpretive reading, we will rearrange the stage. Okay, it won't look like this for any other categories. We'll rearrange it so that this table will slide over here and it will look like a typical debating setup, and speakers will be able to stand in front of the middle of the stage here for persuasive speaking and impromptu speaking and after dinner speaking as they most likely want to. Okay, so don't worry, there won't be a table there and a chair, etc. for anything but interpretive reading. So hopefully that clarifies sort of the order of things, and I'd like to invite to formally begin the competition and to start moderating our co-head of debating and public speaking, Eve Kavanaugh, to kick things off. Round of applause for Eve.
I'm pleased to welcome you to the grand finals at the 2019 World Individual Debating and Public Speaking Championships. Our judges in this round are Patrick Marmon, Grace Nolan, Emma Tamman, Catriona Woodford, Kirsten Wyndham-West. Would the judges please come forward? Our timer is Riva Jangra, and I, Eve Kavanaugh, am your moderator. In this event, we will be hearing interpretive readings. Each participant will read a passage of prose or poetry, serious or humorous, with an appropriate introduction which explains the appeal of the selection. The piece must have been published. The time limit is from 5 to 11 minutes, including the introduction. This is to be a prepared reading, not a memorized dramatic presentation. Our competitors today are John Smith, Julia Nawu, Jacqueline Morgan. I invite John Smith to deliver his reading.
Did You Hear Me Cry by Kathryn Goble follows the childhood of a girl called Kat, where she narrates her childhood life growing up in 1970s Ireland, centered around the horrific and often harrowing abuse she was subjected to at the hands of her father. The novel, based on a true story, helps raise awareness over the issue of child abuse in homes, an issue which is more relevant in modern-day society than many people seem to think. And this book in particular shows us that it can often come from homes we expected from least. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, did you hear me cry? My mother started to get really upset, as my stepfather was due home and was now late. She convinced herself that he must have got caught up in the Dublin bombings and was lying dead somewhere. My sisters were crying, but I remember I didn't cry. I was just looking around blankly at everyone outside, being so hysterical, with the sound of fire engines and ambulances whizzing around the city almost deafening. My poor mother just sobbingly kept calling my stepfather's name over and over again. And then, out of the blue, walking around the corner, there was my stepfather, cigarette in one hand and bike in the other. He was alive. As he came towards us, my mother and sisters ran to greet him like some returning war hero. But my heart dropped when I saw him. I secretly wished that he'd been killed. I thought that if he was dead, then the things that he did to me could finally stop. The reason he got home, as the story was told 1,000 times, was because he'd worked late and missed his normal train. If he'd been on time, if he hadn't worked so hard, then he would have walked straight into the thick of the bombings. If only he did. It was a terribly sad day for Dublin. So many innocent people were lost, probably really good people too. And then there was my stepfather, full of evil, yet still walking around with not as much as a scratch on him. Of course, we still had to go to church on Sunday and praise the Lord and say many hallelujahs for my stepfather missing his train. The church said it was God's will. Apparently, Daddy was such a good, God-loving Christian. The church's answer to everything was to praise God. Yet everyone at the church was so busy praising God that no one saw the horrendous abuse going on right in front of their eyes. I remember going to sit and pray from deep in my heart, asking this wonderful, almighty God, Savior of souls, to help me. God, don't let Daddy beat me again. I pleaded, but my prayers were never answered, and the things he did to me continued. Despite this, I did believe in a God, and I was convinced that my life would get better, but it didn't. Amidst my prayers, I didn't feel any different either, nor did they take away from the pain of what happened. There is one evening in particular, however, which I remember above most. Daddy came back from the pub, drunk. I heard him trudging up the stairs to my room. Scared, I didn't know what to do. So quick as a flash, without thinking, I slammed my door shut and I locked it. I was shaking from head to toe for being so bold. He was banging on my door and shouting, "Cass, open your door!" "No, Daddy," I replied. "Cass, open your fucking door, you're dead!" This continued for a few minutes, with him getting angrier and angrier, and me getting more and more scared. Yet after a while, he changed his tone, and his voice became softer. "Cass, open the door, please." I refused because I thought he would beat me, but he promised that he wouldn't. So I made him promise again that he wouldn't be cross and that he wouldn't touch me. And believing him, I slowly opened the door. But I had no sooner shot the bolt when he grabbed me by the throat. I nearly died of fright. He pushed me back into the wall and slowly took off his belt, winding it around his hand, buckle side out. In moments of terror, he lifted it up while screaming about what a pain I was, and just as quickly as it went up, in one sweeping movement, it came back down. Again and again. So much so that I lost count. Even though I was used to it by now, He hit me so hard on my bottom and legs that I had welts, and there was not a single part of my body not deeply marked and sore. He then grabbed me by my hair and dragged me and flung me onto my bed, slamming the door shut behind him. I sat in my room, shaking and sobbing silently. I felt broken. Every part of my body ached. My fingers were cut, my body was in pain, and my head hurt from where he grabbed my hair so tightly. He shouted from outside my door that he'd be back, and he was. But I'd rather not say what happened next. The next day, I was very sore, and I noticed I had big handprints on my legs and bruises across my back. I wanted to tell my mother. I wanted to scream to her what Daddy had done to me, to scream so loudly how much I was hurting. I wanted to show her the marks on me, to sob in her arms and be held by her, to scream and to scream. But I knew she wouldn't believe me. And even if I did tell her, she would somehow blame me and I would be the one getting into terrible trouble. I decided that I just had to pretend that nothing happened. And I convinced myself that what did happen wouldn't happen again. But it did. Over and over again, nearly every single day until I was 16. I learned to try and switch off when my stepfather beat me. I would try to take my mind to anywhere I could, thinking about anything and everything other than what was actually happening. Sometimes I would even pretend I had a different family, one that actually loved me, and that one day they would come and rescue me. Needless to say, that day never came. Daddy, what was going through your mind as you repeatedly abused me? When I pleaded with you, please, Daddy, no! How could you smile when you could see pure fear in my little eyes? How could you get pleasure from a child so small, so young, so vulnerable? You remember as I cried in pain as you strived to gain your sick gratification? Do you remember my body barely being able to stand as the fear and the pain you caused in me almost made my knees buckle? Did you ever look in my eyes and feel disgust for what you were doing? Do you remember you would throw me around like a doll and make me believe that everything that happened and every single thing you did to me was my fault? Daddy, did you hear me crying?
Thank you. I invite the next competitor, Julia Nawu, to deliver her reading.
The year is 1986, and young Nigerian girl Little B is forced to flee her war-stricken country in favor of an illegal journey on a tea ship headed towards the United Kingdom. There, she utters the following words: "Tea is the taste of the distance between where you are and where you come from." Little B is a raw, simple tale on how an illegal immigrant is not just a number for statistics, but that each refugee is in themselves a walking story. In the excerpt I've chosen to read today, Little B and her newfound friend Yvette, along with 2 other women, have just been released from an immigration detention center after being held there for the past 2 years under dire conditions. The two women's very different responses to this terrible situation of being in a foreign country with no papers are expressed in two contrasting ways. Yvette is nonchalant and quite humorous, while little B is innocent and nervous. These two different attitudes are just two different ways of expressing a common phobia: the fear of being sent home. Ladies and gentlemen, Little B by Chris Cleave. Me. I was a woman under white fluorescent light strips in an underground room in an immigration detention center 50 miles east of London. There were no seasons there. Cold, 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 and I did not have anyone to smile at. Those cold years are frozen inside me. The African girl they locked up in the immigration detention center, poor child, she never really escaped. In my soul, she's still locked up in there forever, under the fluorescent lights, her knees tucked up underneath her chin. And this woman they released from the immigration detention center, this creature that I have become, she is a new breed of human. There is nothing natural about me. Imagine a young woman cut out from a smiling Save the Children magazine, who dresses herself in threadbare pink clothes from the recycling bin in your local supermarket car park, and speaks English like the Nigerian version of the leader of the column Times. I would cross the street to avoid me. Truly, this is one thing that people from my country and your country can agree upon. They say, that refugee girl is not quite one of us. That girl does not belong. That girl is a halfling, child of unnatural mating, an unfamiliar face in the moon. So, I am a refugee. And yes, I get very lonely. After we had been let out of the immigration detention center, we met a kind farmer, Albert, who allowed us to stay in one of his backyard stalls until we four girls were ready to leave. Albert had left the door open, and a few hens came in and began to look for food under the beds. The girl with no name screamed when she saw the hens coming in, and she held her knees close to her chest and started to rock backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. Relax, darling. They ain't gonna hurt you. There's only chickens. You not see it? Yvette sighed. Here we go again, huh, little bug? Yes, here we go again. That girl in a bad way, huh? I looked over at the girl with no name. She was staring at Yvette and making the sign of a cross. Yes, I said. Maybe this is the hardest part, little bug. Nowadays, letting us out. In that detention center, they was always telling you, do this, do that. No time to think. Now, all of a sudden, they gone quiet, no. That dangerous, me telling you. Let all the bad memory come back. You think that is why she is crying? Me know it, darling. We all gotta mind our heads now, truth. I shrugged. But what do we do now? No idea, darling. You ask me, this gonna be our #1 problem living in this country. Where me come from, we ain't got no peace, but we got 1,000 rumors. You always got a whisper where you can go for this or that. But around these ends, we got the opposite problem, bug. We got the peace, but we ain't got no information. You know what I'm saying? I looked Yvette in the eyes. What is going on, Yvette? What is this trick you have done? How come they let us out of the immigration detention center without any papers? Me did a a favor for one of them immigration men, all right? He make a few changes on the computer, just put a tick in the right box, and pow, up come the names for release. You, me, and them other two girls. Them detention officers don't be asking no questions. They just see your name pop up on the screen, they take you from your room and they show you the door. No time to be thinking about where you come from and where you're going. So, here we is, free and easy. Except we don't have papers. Yeah, but I ain't afraid. I am afraid. Yvette, do you even know anyone in this country? Sure, darling. William Shakespeare, Lady Diana, Battle of Britain. We know them all. Learned them for me citizenship exam. No, I mean, do you know where we will go when we get out of here? Sure, darling. I got people in London. Got the half of Jamaica living down in Colaba Lane. Probably bitching about how much they vexed by all the Nigerians living next door. How about you? You got family there? I showed her the United Kingdom driver's license from my see-through plastic bag. It was a small plastic card with Andrew O'Rourke's photo on it. Yvette held it up to look at it. What thing is this? It is a driving license. It has the man's address on it. I'm going to visit him. Yvette held the photo card close and she stared at it. Then she held it far from her eyes and squinted down her nose at it. Then she looked up close again. She blinked. This is a white man, little bug. I know that. Okay, just checking. Just establishing whether you're blind or stupid. I smiled, but Yvette did not. We should stick together, darling. Why you not come to London with me? For sure, we're going to find some of your people down there. But I will not know them, Yvette. I will not know I can trust them. What? And you trust this Caucasian man? I met him once. Excuse me, Bug, but this man don't look like your type. I met him in my country. What the hell was this man's business in Nigeria? I met him on a beach. Yvette threw her head back and slapped her thighs. Now, Missy. And they told me you was a virgin. I shook my head. It was not like that. Don't tell me it wasn't like that, little Miss Sexy Bug. You must have done something to the man, make him give you this valuable document. His wife was there too, Yvette. She's a beautiful lady. She is called Sarah. So why he give you this driver license? His wife be so beautiful, he be thinking, damn, me won't be needing this no more. Me lady so pretty, I ain't never gonna drive nowhere no more. Me just gonna sit home and stare at a wife. I looked away. What happened, little bug? I cannot talk about it. It happened in another lifetime. Maybe you've been spending too much time learning this fancy English of yours, because that is crazy talk. You only be living one life, darling. Don't matter, you don't appreciate part of it, because it don't ever stop being a part of you. It is hard for me, Yvette, to think about that day I met Andrew and Sarah. I'm sure there are parts of your life you do not like to talk about, Yvette. Only so you not get jealous, Bug. Me tell you some of the things me done in me life for ease and luxury. You be getting yourself so jealous, you're gonna explode. And then sorry girl over there gonna have to mop you up. And she looked tired as it is, you ask me. No, I'm serious, Yvette. Do you talk about what happened to you to make you come to the United Kingdom? Yvette stopped smiling. Nah, me tell people what happened to me, they ain't never gonna believe it. People think Jamaica be all sunshine and ganja and Jah Rastafari, but it ain't. You get on the wrong side of the politics, Bug, they're gonna make you suffer. They're gonna make your family suffer. And me don't mean suffer like no ice cream for a week. Suffer wake up in your children's blood. Suddenly, your house go very, very quiet. And never. Amen.
Thank you. I invite Jacqueline Morgan to come and deliver her reading.
When people say there's too much violence in my books, what they are saying is there's too much reality in life. Such were the words of American author Joyce Carol Oates, recipient of a Lifetime Literary Achievement Award and a National Humanities Medal. What exists behind Oates' quote are her even deeper commentaries on her themes of control and confinement, evident in her short story we will soon venture into, Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? In this acclaimed work, Oates has created Connie, a young female character who demonstrates that even when presented with a dire situation, a young lady does not need to be a damsel in distress. And yet, in spite of Connie's own control, the audience must themselves confront the force that will take this control away from her, making us all wonder where Connie is going and where she has been all along. I ain't late, am I? The driver said. Well, I told you I'd be out, didn't I? I don't even know who you are, Connie said. Want to come for a ride? Connie smirked and let her hair fall loose over one shoulder. You're cute. Don't you believe me or what? Look, I don't even know who you are. I'm Arnold's friend, and I'm gonna be your friend, honey. Inside the car, here's Ellie Oscar. He's kind of shy. Don't you want to come for a ride? I don't know. Well, why not? I got things to do. Honey, you ain't telling the truth. This is your day set aside for a ride with me, and you know it. How do you know what my name is? Oh, it's Connie. I know my Connie. Now she remembered him. Back at the restaurant, and her cheeks warmed at the thought of how she had sucked in her breath right at the moment she had passed him. How she must have looked to him. Ellie and I came out here especially for you. How about it? Where? Where what? Where are we going? Just for a ride, Connie, sweetheart. I never said my name was Connie. A special interest in you. I found out all about you. Like I know your parents and your sister are gone somewhere, and I know where and how long they're gonna be gone. I know who you were with last night. How did you find out about all that stuff? Listen, Betty Schultz, Tony Fitch, Jimmy Pettinger and Nancy Pettinger, Raymond Stanley, Bob Hutter. Do you know all those kids? Oh, I know everybody. You're kidding. You're not from around here. Sure. But how come I never seen you before? Oh, you saw me before. You just don't remember. I remember you. Yeah. What do you think about, huh? Not worried about your hair blowing around in my car, are you? No? Think maybe I can't drive good. How do I know? Or a girl to handle. How come? Don't you know I want to be your friend? Hey, how old are you? His smile faded. She could see then he wasn't a kid, he was much older. Her heart began to pound faster. That's a crazy thing to ask. Can't you see I'm your own age? Like hell you are. Maybe you two had better go away. What? How come? We came out here to take you for a ride, and honey, no matter who you were with last night, today you're with Arnold's friend. Step out here. No, I got things to do. Hey, you two better leave. We ain't leaving until you come with us. Like hell I am, Connie. Don't you fool around with me. If my father comes and sees you, then he ain't coming. It's at a barbecue. Oh, do you know that? Aunt Tilly's. Right now, they're, drinking, sitting around. There's your sister in the blue dress and the high heels, Poor, sad bitch. Nothing like you, sweetheart. Now, what you're gonna do is this. You're gonna step out that door. You're gonna sit up front with me, and Ellie here's gonna sit in the back. To hell with Ellie, right? This isn't Ellie's date. You're my date. I'm your lover, honey. What? What? You're crazy. Yes, I'm your lover, and I know all about you. But look, it's real nice, and you couldn't ask for nobody better than me. Shut up! You're crazy. You're crazy. She looked out to see Arnold's friend pause and then take a step toward the porch, lurching. He wobbled in his high boots and grabbed hold of the porch post. Honey, you still listening? Get the hell out of here. Be nice, honey. Listen. I'm going to call the police, honey. Listen. Here's how it is, I promise you this. I ain't coming in that house after you. You better not. I'm gonna call the police, honey. I'm not coming in there, but you're coming out here. You know why? Honey, you listening? Going to call the police soon. As you touch that phone, I don't keep my promise and I can come inside. We wouldn't want that. She rushed forward and tried to lock the door. Her fingers were trembling. I lock it. It's just a screen door. It's just nothing. If this place got lit up with fire, honey, you come running into my arms, straight into my arms, and safe and sound. What do you want? I want you. Why? That night I thought, that's the one. I never needed to look no more. But my father's coming back, and he's coming to get me. Oh, don't you know who I am? Crazy. She backed away from the door. You're crazy. Huh? What are we saying, honey? You come out here and we'll have a nice ride. But if you don't come out, we're going to wait until your people come home, and then they're all going to get it. Listen, why bring them into this? Leave me alone. She ran into the back room and picked up the telephone. Something roared in her ear, and she was so sick with fear she could do nothing but sit there and listen to it. She began to scream into the roaring. She felt her breath start jerking back and forth as if it were something Arnold's friend was stabbing her with again and again. Arnold's friend was saying from the door, "That's a good girl." She kicked the phone away from her. No, honey. Put it back right. Girl, now you come outside. She was hollow with what had been fear, but what was now just an emptiness. She thought, I'm not going to see my mother again. I'm not going to sleep in my bed again. The place you came from ain't here no more. Go out to a nice field, out in the country here where it smells so nice and it's sunny. The hell with this house. It looks solid all right. Put your hand on your heart, honey. Feel that? That feels solid too, but we know better. Be nice to me. Be sweet like you can, because what else is there for a girl like you to do but be sweet and pretty and given? Thank you.
Our next category is Impromptu Speaking. Our judges today are Andy Hume, Mary Crawland, Sean McCabe, Virginia Parkinson, and Stuart Patterson. I would now like to invite these judges to the table. Our timer is Eve Kavanaugh, and I, Riva, will be your moderator. The instructions for impromptu speaking are as follows. Each speaker will draw one paper that contains 3 topics, which may be words, quotations, phrases, or statements. The speaker then has 2 minutes to select one of 3 topics and to prepare his or her comments. Competitors may speak in favor or against the topic seen. The speech will then be 3 to 5 minutes in length. Competitors may make notes, but they may not be used when speaking. At the end of the speech, please return the paper with the prompts given. The competitors today are Zaki Lakhani and Maddie Ritter. I would now like to invite up Zaki Lakhani to the front. Your time is now up.
I think it's safe to say that life requires us to possess many unique qualities, to look around us, to critically think, to challenge popular notions every single day. It's questions like, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Why is Zaki so incredibly attractive and speaks so well all at the same time? But ultimately, I think that one quality in particular enables us as humans to go where we've never gone before, to question ourselves constantly, to push the new boundaries of what we think is capable for ourselves. And that quality is curiosity. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Zaki Lakhani, and the topic I was given today was curiosity. And I believe this is a critical human quality. I'm going to be exploring the effects of curiosity and how it develops oneself by looking at 2 individuals, the first being Kathryn Goble, and the second being the story of a young man who grew up in Uganda and had to make a life-changing decision. So let's begin with Kathryn Goble. Kathryn Goble is who we know as one of the 3 hidden figures. She was enlisted by NASA in the 1960s in the height of the space race, the Soviet Union versus the United States. And there was one primary goal: get Mercury 7 with astronaut John Glenn inside into space and into orbit. Now, Kathryn had incredible mathematical abilities. She was able to calculate everything. In fact, they called her a human computer. But she was also living in an age rooted in segregation, and it was around her each and every day. Everything from segregated desks to segregated bathrooms to segregated coffee pots. Now, when you need to work out the specific numbers to get a man into orbit, those are challenges for you. But it was Kathryn's curiosity that captured the attention of those around her and changed the reality of her society. She was an individual who looked inside every single number that everyone else was calculating and saw what they didn't. She created value others couldn't by seeing what others couldn't. It was her curiosity, her innate passion to look at things from different angles that ultimately allowed her to solve the code and to crack it. And John Glenn made it into orbit thanks to her incredible mind. But that wasn't all. because she was living in the age of segregation and she felt an inherent responsibility to try and change her circumstances. And among all this curiosity, she was able to make that change. She witnessed the striking down of segregated bathroom signs during her time there in her ability to speak up, to voice her concerns, to ensure that they were going towards a common goal. And it was her curiosity that united everyone around her, not only in terms of race, but in terms of achieving that common goal. That's the power of curiosity. And it can be further explored in a story about a young man who grew up in Uganda. Now, this is in the 1970s, and Uganda was undergoing massive political changes under the dictatorship of Idi Amin, and he issued an ultimatum. He gave all racial minorities just 90 days to leave the country and find new homes for their families. Now, the man I'm talking about is my grandfather, Amir Lakhani. Now, you see, he was a curious man, and in spite of these circumstances, he put everything on the line. He knew that his future and the future of his family and future generations was threatened. But he had a sense of curiosity within him. He imagined, what could I do so that my future generations could take advantage of incredible opportunities? And in those 90 days, he traveled across Canada, across the United States, and ultimately settled for here, for this great country that I get to live in today. And I think it's my grandfather's curiosity and passion, and I know he's watching this video at some point, that allowed me to be the person that I am today. It was his curiosity, his desire to provide a better life for his future generations that makes me who I am. So whether you want to put a man in space, or simply create a better future for your own family and for your own generations, curiosity is what drives us as humans. So look deeper into things. Ask more questions, because no question is a bad question. And trust me, with the power of curiosity that all of you possess, truly incredible things are possible. Thank you.
The topic was curiosity, and I would now like to invite up Maddie Ritter to the front. Your time is now up.
As we all know, there was an enormous amount of work that was put into preparing for this competition. The endless practices, the reruns of speeches, staying up late and having many panic attacks, trying desperately to convince ourselves that we can do this. And aside from that, there's of course the biggest challenge, all of the school that we missed. Talking to friends about having to do essays, studying for science tests, and just generally speaking, feeling very anxious about not being at our educational institutions. Well, of course, this was frightening to me too. But as I took on more and more work, I realized that I had greater motivation to finish everything. It's because I was taking on things that I was passionate about and putting effort into things that I cared about, that I was willing to make time to get these things done because I found them important. Now, to me, this really taught me a valuable lesson that I shouldn't be afraid to take on big tasks. And that's what drew me to the topic that I've chosen today. The less one has to do, the less time one finds to do it in. Oftentimes, we are drawn to doing things in the easiest or simplest ways possible. And at first, this may seem like a benefit. After all, we have less responsibility and it's less scary. But when we take on less important tasks, This is actually rather self-destructive, because ultimately they seem less important in our minds and we have less desire to work on them and to change our circumstances and to put that effort in. Therefore, it's important to actually remember to take on those big tasks. This is true for two reasons. The first reason is that on an individual level, we will never find fulfillment from taking on these small, menial things. As I said, when we find things unimportant, we aren't going to make time to work on them. When we feel as though we have all the time in the world, well, that's how we're going to act. We're not going to act until we feel as though there's no time left. And this is intrinsically problematic because we are going to lack that feeling of purpose. We are going to lack that feeling of having something to do that is important in our lives. That's why we must remember that the less we do, the less time we have to do it. And we must counter that by being willing to take on those big projects, those things that we have to strive for, so we have that sense of urgency and purpose to guide us throughout our lives. However, there is a second reason why this is necessary, because this principle can guide us far beyond an individual level. It can do so on a societal level. If we as a society set low goals for ourselves, we probably aren't going to work that hard to achieve them because we are going to assume that it's going to be able to be done without a lot of effort. If we remember that taking on big goals is going to encourage us to work harder, well, that's when we're going to see real change. Whether it's in the field of climate change and environmental protection, through things like environmental conferences or Davos summits, or it's through things like the actions of the Prime Minister of New Zealand in reaction to the terrorist attacks on the mosque just recently, when she put into account extreme gun legislation in her country. What we can see from this is that taking on small amounts of things and that require small amounts of energy isn't what motivate these types of broad societal changes. It's taking on the big things, the large goals that will encourage people to work hard and will therefore have the longest lasting impact in society. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're to take one thing away from this speech, it's not to overload yourself with homework simply because you think you can do it. It's not to say, I'm going to become an astronaut when you don't really have the training and would probably die if you went to space. But it's not to restrain yourself to those small tasks that will eventually leave you unmotivated. It's to push yourself. Take on things that may seem scary at first, but ultimately will motivate you and lead you to act with a sense of urgency. Because ultimately, it is doing those things and taking those strides that will allow us to make a difference. Thank you.
The topic was, the less one has to do, the less time one finds to do it. I would like to thank both competitors for both their remarks in the impromptu category.
Our next category will be persuasive speaking. Before the event begins, would the debaters please meet Mr. Williams just outside? Our judges for this round are Giedra Akramiene, David Conti, Roger Hatridge, Mike Hodge, and Anna Mells. Our timer is Athena Mancini, and I, Lauren O, am your moderator. Persuasive speeches are designed to persuade and must be on a serious topic. This does not mean that humor and wit might not be useful in the speech. A problem-solution approach must be taken. Speakers must identify a problem and must propose or examine one or more solutions to it. The time limit is 7 to 13 minutes. Notes must be limited to one note card. The competitors in this category are Anna Croxon and Naledi Mohal. I invite the first competitor to deliver their speech.
Pippa Pipibiddle 2018 Tanzania Volunteer Trip Expectations. In high school, I received the opportunity to travel to Tanzania with 14 of my closest friends. $3,000 bought us a week at an orphanage, a half-built library, and a few pickup soccer games, all of which was followed by a week-long safari. I was excited to learn about a new culture, try new food, and see a different part of the world, all while giving back to the less fortunate. Essentially, all we had to do was help lay a few bricks and care for a few children, which in my perspective didn't seem like a difficult task. It promised to be a trip of a lifetime. Pipibiddle 2018 Tanzania Volunteer Trip Reality. It turns out that we, a group of highly educated private boarding school students, were so bad at the most basic construction work that each night local men had to take down the structurally unsound bricks we had laid and rebuild the structure so that when we awoke the next morning, we would be unaware of our failures from the previous day. We would work for 6 hours, and then they would work for an extra 12 trying to fix our mistakes. On paper, I would be, by most people's standards, highly qualified to do international aid because I'm good at fundraising, planning, and communicating. But qualified, I am not. I am not a teacher, carpenter, engineer, doctor, or any other profession that could provide meaningful support and long-term solutions to communities in developing countries. I'm a 5'4" girl who can carry bags of moderately heavy stuff, horse around with kids, attempt to teach a class, and tell the story of how I found myself to a few thousand people upon my return. The reality is, I was grossly underqualified for the tasks presented to me and did very little to help the community in which I had visited. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is not Pipibiddle, but based off of my own experiences and the experiences of many others, it very well could be. My name is Anna Croxon, and the problem I'm going to be outlining for you today is the catastrophic effects of one of the world's fastest growing industries. An industry which essentially profits off of the misfortune of others while capitalizing on the ignorance of young people. This industry is volunteer tourism, or as it is more commonly known now, voluntourism. Before I begin, I would like to briefly explain what exactly is meant by the word voluntourism. Voluntourism is a term used to describe a specific type of travel in which people travel abroad to participate in volunteer work, typically associated with a charity. However, the placement is more so designed with the intent of providing an experience to the volunteer as opposed to fulfilling specific needs within the host community. So now that we know what voluntourism is, firstly, I'm going to begin by examining the exponential growth of voluntourism and how it has rapidly turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Secondly, I will discuss the ethical implications associated with voluntourism and how it can actually perpetuate negative stereotypes about host countries. Finally, I will offer a series of solutions which, if adopted, will effect necessary change to this industry and prove significantly more beneficial to the developing countries it targets. So firstly, what is the scale of the problem? Save the Children, an international non-governmental organization, states that each year 1.6 million people participate in overseas volunteer work and that voluntourism is the fastest growing trend in travel. In 2004, it was reported that over 800 organizations provided overseas volunteering in more than 200 countries. And that number has been steadily increasing since then. According to a study conducted by Statistics Canada, the voluntourism industry is worth approximately $173 billion globally. However, of that $173 billion, only a very small margin of it actually goes to the community itself. Companies organizing these trips typically partner with entities in host countries who also help facilitate these experiences. Meals, accommodation, and travel expenses leave little left over for the community itself, while those opportunists redeem the profits. One can certainly understand why these types of trips are so popular. They allow participants to combine vacation with the perception of giving back, ultimately leaving the volunteerist feeling fulfilled. So the question is, why is volunteerism so unethical? As admirably altruistic as the idea sounds, the central problem with volunteerism is the focus on the quest for the volunteer's experience as opposed to the recipient community's actual needs. The focus on this quest can lead to unethical activities which often do more harm than good to the communities it's trying to help. Firstly, volunteers are mostly assigned manual labor, such as building schools and houses. This makes absolutely no sense, considering professional bricklayers from that community could easily build a school or a house faster and with better safety and craftsmanship. It would be like turning down a small group of professional coders for a large-scale computer database project and hiring a horde of elementary schoolers with no experience instead. The reality is, those who are trying to help are actively displacing local craftsmen who are qualified to and could get paid for the work. This system is inefficient, and communities would most certainly be better off if instead of volunteering, people directly streamed money into the communities they wanted to help so they could build infrastructure on their own. This would therefore enable the people of that community to do the work, get paid, and reinvest in the local economy. Clearly, by denying the general population the opportunity to work in favor of unskilled volunteers is rather contradictory to the goal the volunteerism industry is trying to achieve in the first place. Another problem plaguing the volunteerism industry is that there are no background checks conducted on volunteers. Anyone can sign up with an organization or walk into an orphanage or a community and begin volunteering. In one particularly horrific incident, a 21-year-old man from Oklahoma was charged with 7 counts of illicit sexual misconduct while volunteering at an orphanage in Kenya. Similarly, a journalist from Al Jazeera walked into an orphanage in Cambodia one night and checked out 4 orphans. He later reported that he did not have to present any documents or paperwork authenticating his identity. This lack of background checks leaves communities more susceptible to violence, and people are more likely to be victimized because of it. Finally, the volunteerism industry perpetuates a notion of a desperate, underdeveloped country needing the benevolence of the Western world. And further, volunteers actually treat the people they're claiming to help in a culturally insensitive manner. The simple act of taking a photograph, for example, while very normal for us here in the West, is actually extremely frowned upon in certain cultures. So why then do we allow volunteers to go and take pictures of children laying in hospital beds or playing in orphanages? Why are the standards so different in the developed versus developing world? By photographing, sharing, and potentially posting for the world to see, while for those offenders capturing memories, they are actually perpetuating Western imperialist ideals. What is now termed poverty porn is something that has never even been contemplated in the Western world, but seems to have become increasingly prevalent for volunteers on trips in places like Haiti and Kenya. This idea of doling out tens of thousands of dollars to travel and fix a country, while in reality treating the people you're trying to help as if they are inferior, sounds exactly like the imperialistic policies that ripped some of these developing countries apart in the first place. They slow down positive growth and perpetuate the white savior complex, something which has haunted both the countries we're trying to help and our own psyches. So finally then, what can we do? How can we volunteer and give back, but in ways that are both ethical and sustainable? Firstly, volunteer experiences need to be reworked and programs reframed. Any organization taking volunteers abroad must prepare them with adequate information about the social, political, and cultural histories of the places they are visiting. They must have the opportunity to explore systems of inequality and poverty in greater depth. Most importantly, however, volunteers need to view these trips as cultural exchanges, meant to generate knowledge and respect about other ways of being, as opposed to trips to simply help the poor. Once volunteers start seeing the people they're working with as citizens with rights as opposed to objects of charity, they can begin thinking about long-term partnership, justice, and structural change. In addition, we must ensure that the volunteers we're bringing over actually have skills which can be transferred to the community. These communities need educators, engineers, scientists, carpenters, doctors, yes, to help them, but more importantly, to give them the adequate skills to help themselves. This ensures a long-term change as opposed to a short-term Band-Aid. Secondly, directly streaming the money into the countries you want to help through validated organizations is the most beneficial way to make a resounding impact. By donating money to charities such as World Vision and Give Directly, they will utilize your money to partner with local people and governments to ensure that the money is spent in a way that will be most impactful. Among many things, this includes sponsoring a child throughout their educational experience or building infrastructure. Finally, volunteer locally. Volunteering is a great experience and not something I want to discourage anyone from doing. In an increasingly violent and xenophobic world, these types of cross-cultural engagements can actually help cultivate respect and knowledge about other ways of being. However, leave the international volunteer work to trained professionals and qualified charities, and instead, immerse yourself on a local level. For example, Toronto, like all other international cities, has tremendous need. It has poverty. It has a huge homelessness crisis and many organizations begging for volunteers to help give back to the less fortunate. And while it may not sound as exciting as Kenya or Haiti, it still fulfills a specific need and leaves you with a similar sense of making a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, volunteering is a great endeavor, arguably one that every citizen and student should undertake at least once in their lifetime. However, only by rechanneling our efforts and really examining the organizations vying for our volunteer dollars can we truly make a difference. It is time to stop combining tourism with volunteering, and instead, maybe it's time to simply take a vacation. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the next competitor to deliver their speech.
Contrary to what Professor Uranium from the Powerpuff Girls would like us to believe, successful women are not made with sugar, spice, and everything nice. Kris Jenner has shown us that the ingredients to building a $1.56 billion empire are hard work, good connections, a touch of luck, and most importantly, the secret ingredient which sets you apart from the rest, strategically making yourself black. Because, hey, if you can't beat them, why not join them? Blackfishing is the practice of a non-black person manipulating their features in order to appear racially ambiguous or as though they have some type of black African ancestry. It is mostly used as a tool by social media influencers in order to appeal to a wider audience to grow their follower base. Most of the people involved in this growing phenomenon achieve their look through excessive tanning, surgery, and some even go as far as injecting themselves with a drug called melatonin. Melatonin, also known as the Barbie drug, is a synthetic hormone which works by stimulating pigment cells in the skin to produce more melanin in order to give the skin a darker color. It is not only unsafe for use by humans, but it is also illegal in many countries. Its side effects include acne, stomach pains, heart problems, and even cancer. Its users are well aware of these side effects, but willingly risk their lives in order to achieve this million-dollar look. Blackfishing is mostly centered around altering your appearance, but it also goes with altering your personality traits, hairstyles, and behaviors in order to fit this persona which you are trying to sell to people. We have become so accustomed to celebrities appropriating the cultures of people of color that the world has bought into the lie that Ariana Grande, who is Italian, is of Latin American descent, and that Kim Kardashian, who is Armenian, should be featured on a list of the most inspirational Black moms. The interesting part about celebrities making themselves darker or having kinky hair extensions is that that trend is almost never applied to their photo shoots for high-end magazines, where they can be seen with lighter skin and straighter hair. We are all born into a culture, and not with a particular culture already embedded within us, but using other people's culture as a prop whenever you see fit is something to which we should all say, in the words of Ariana Grande herself's hit song, "Thank you, next." Blackfishing is not only cultural appropriation, but it is also the modern-day equivalent of blackface. It is yet another instance of white women profiting and benefiting from appropriating and ridiculing another race. Most of the Kardashian millions are made through appearing on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but they are able to maintain their relevance and stay in the public eye because of the large number of campaigns that they're involved in, owing to their looks. The butts big enough to break the internet, the petulant lips, and the darker skin. Brands encourage this blackfishing by giving them endorsements based on this black aesthetic, while actual women of color are sidelined for these jobs. The irony is that if any of these women ever got bored with being ambassadors for this black aesthetic, they could simply take a shower, remove their hair extensions, and reclaim their white privilege. Levels of unemployment amongst women of color are still much higher than those of their white counterparts. But even when jobs are suited for them, they seemingly can't even get their foot in the door. In 2013, Kylie Jenner started sporting thicker lips. When asked if she had had lip fillers, she told the media that her lips were the result of excessive lip lining. This little white lie not only sparked the beginning of the very dangerous Kylie Jenner lip challenge, but it also saw Kylie starting her own cosmetics company. Kylie Cosmetics gained vast popularity because people wanted to achieve the Kylie Jenner look. Owing to the success of Kylie Cosmetics, Kylie Jenner was named by Forbes magazine as the world's youngest self-made billionaire. Another cosmetics powerhouse, MAC Cosmetics, recently posted a picture advertising a new shade of lipstick. The model featured in the picture was a black girl with thick lips. One would assume that since thick lips were praised on Kylie Jenner, the same could be expected for this model in the MAC Cosmetics advert. But that could not be further from the truth. Some of the nicer comments left underneath the picture called the girl ugly and said that she had fish lips. Brittney Noble Jones, is an award-winning American news anchor who faced immense discrimination and prejudicial treatment in the workplace, which resulted in her losing her job. One of the reasons for this being that she refused to continue straightening her hair. Her boss told her that, and I quote, "Her natural hair was unprofessional, the equivalent of him wearing a baseball cap to the grocery store. Viewers needed to see a beauty queen." These are just two instances wherein Black women have faced immense racism and discrimination for being the difficult to digest versions of Blackness. Dismissing the existence and problematic nature of blackfishing, because Black women also wear Eurocentric hairstyles and lighten their skin, is just as harmful as participating in the practice itself. Black women have been and still are being subjected to European standards of beauty, to the point where assimilation with these societal expectations has been the main mode of survival in white-dominated spheres. The hair of Black women has to be straight, and their names have to be easy to pronounce, because anything other than that is deemed unprofessional. Dark skin on Black women is only praised online. But when the keyboards are away and the screens are off, dark-skinned Black women are still seen as the bottom of the barrel in terms of beauty. In 2013, a 6-year-old girl from the USA attempted to commit suicide after relentless bullying from her classmates about her dark skin. Just last year, a 14-year-old girl from India succumbed to her burn wounds. She had set herself on fire after tormenting and harassment from her classmates about her dark skin. If I had not grown up in a family which affirmed my worth, in spite of what society says about dark-skinned women, then their stories could have easily been mine. Blackfishing has not only shown us how powerful social media is in shifting beauty standards, but it has also proven that the features of Black women are beautiful and praiseworthy, just not on them. When done correctly, exposing people to different cultures can be a great tool in developing an understanding for others, which is why the solution to blackfishing can be broken down into 3 simple parts. Firstly, remove the blackfish from the water which sustains their livelihoods. The reason why the Kardashians are able to continue using other people's cultures to make money and inspiring social media influencers to do the same is because we, society, keep supporting them. We keep buying their products and following their trends, which allows them to live in this bubble believing that what they are doing is okay. When it comes time to using Black features to make money, the Kardashians are always first in line. But when it comes time to speak up for the rights of the people whose cultures they're continuously appropriating, barring Kim on the odd occasion, neither the Kardashians nor their vast wealth are anywhere to be seen. The second part is representation. More representation in the beauty industry is required, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes, if we expect to see a sustainable change. The reason why Gucci was able to make a sweater resembling blackface, and why Balenciaga was able to include a noose-like object to adjust one of their hoodies, and more recently, why Allure magazine was able to publish an article on how white women can grow an afro, is because there are not enough people who understand the psychology and struggles of minority cultures involved in the decision-making processes. And lastly, if you ever feel the urge to turn yourself into a black person, don't. If you ever find yourself picking up a tanning lotion that is too dark for you, put it down. If you cannot find the right shade of foundation or one which closely resembles your natural skin tone, please try another store. Love yourself and the skin and the body that you have, rather than attempting to become a caricature of someone else. Because other people's cultures are not costumes. Race has become such an uncomfortable topic worldwide, and we all tiptoe around any conversation having to do with race, that we have left this huge elephant in the room, which is enjoying its stay because no one is brave enough to poke it. Leaving issues such as blackfishing unaddressed has people living in the blissful ignorance, which leads them to celebrate how far we as a society have come in addressing racial issues, when in reality, we have not even left the starting block yet. Charles Caleb Colton once said, "Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery." But in the wise words of Amandla Sterenberg, don't cash crop my cornrows.
I thank the competitors for their speeches and conclude Persuasive Speaking.
Okay, our next category is after dinner speaking. Our judges are Carissa Balkian, Susanna Cummings, Sarah Gretchel, Kevin Mercier, and Elizabeth Stratton. I would now like the judges to please come forth and take their seats. Nina will be your timer, and I, Athena, will be your moderator. In this room, we will be hearing after-dinner speeches. Each speaker must deliver a speech that is designed to entertain as well as to inform. It should be the sort of speech that would be given after the annual dinner for some group of the speaker's choice. The group being addressed should be identified at the start of the speech. The speech should not just be a stand-up comedy routine. The time limit is 5 to 7 minutes. Notes must be limited to 1 note card. Our competitors are Julia Nawu and Mark Karthik. I now welcome Julia to deliver their speech.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, presidents, chancellors, prime ministers, Kardashians, you esteemed leaders of countries and states, and welcome to the first ever environmental seminar of the G194 countries, a special, peaceful union of every recognized state in the world, besides North Korea. Kim had to take a rain check to visit his bomb. My humble apologies for the mix-up, but Kim Jong-un's mom, Kim Jong-un's bomb, truthfully, both came straight out of the boom boom room to produce a system of mass destruction. Speaking of beloved leaders, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our special guest, an yet very successful president of one of the world's most powerful economic states, Robert Mugabe. Thanks for being here, Bob. Before we go on, I cannot start this evening without first acknowledging the environmental efforts of every nation represented here. Besides America, China, Brazil, trivial matters, ladies and gentlemen. As I was saying, we commend you all on your excellent control of environmental rescue departments that, funny story, adopt their name from the fact that the departments themselves need actual rescuing. Or your Save the Earth programs that may or may not exist or have any real funding. Truly, your heroic efforts do not go unnoticed. Mother Nature has never been cleaner nor safer. In fact, we're not even worried about the huge atmospheric hole above the Aussies. Psh, who needs shrimp when we can have the whole of Australia on the barbie? Of course, though, the real question we need to be asking ourselves is, does global warming exist? No, it's about as real as police brutality in America. A gross commercial scheme that our misinformed followers are continually buying into. However, there is no need to fear. By the end of today's seminar, nobody will be telling the difference between the ukulele playing, weed smoking, tie-dye wearing, Rastafarian, threw away my white privilege to hug trees, environmentalist, and yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2019 G194 Environmental Seminar, Faking It Until You Make It. Now, the first step to falsely mastering anything is learning the lingo. Environmental buzzwords like bumblebee, a black and yellow flying insect, or recycle, the heterosexual version of bicycle. Just don't ask me what a tricycle is. Now that we have the lingo down, we move on to step 2, the precious animals. So apparently, panda bears are on the brink of extinction again. At least we all know that past leaders never wanted the black and white to live in harmony anyway. In fact, the near extinction of panda bears is only proof that historical leaders with their systematic oppression really knew what they were talking about. Their legacy lives on not only in the form of dying panda bears, but in remodeled versions of racist, misogynistic regimes. This is proof of the importance of step 3, taking tips from top leaders. Today's leader of choice is Donald J. Dump, the 45th president of the United Seas Association, or USA for short. Donald Dump encourages us to lead with much enthusiasm and sass and really grab our opportunities by the and look forward or behind into achieving your goals. Now, your goals over the past few years may have been interrupted by things like floods, tsunamis, hurricanes, your parents attempting to dance in front of your friends. Mother Nature is obviously fighting back, and our response is found in step 4, entitled The Earth. You see, we need to start talking about issues like deforestation, capitalists moving into our rainforests and turning our precious Amazon off. Issues like plastic pollution on our beaches. I witnessed this atrocity firsthand. Saw those voluptuous women walking onto the beaches, straight out of Dr. Shaw's surgery, 4 cup sizes bigger and lying beside the sea, just casually and shamelessly being plastic pollution on our beaches. Speaking of the ocean, we also need to have discussions about overfishing. According to Sentient Media, every day, 17.3 million fish are removed from the ocean. Scientists predict that in the next 3 decades, there'll be more bags of plastic floating in the ocean than there are fish. Now, what does this very serious statistic mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means that the next time your scumbag boyfriend comes at you with that, well, there are plenty of fish in the sea, babe, you can just tell him, no, Devon, there are not plenty of fish in the sea. In fact, according to my research, there are 17.3 billion less fish in the sea today than there were yesterday. You know what there is down in the sea, Devon? Trash! There's trash in the sea, Devon. Ladies and gentlemen, we can no longer stand by and see overfishing moving into our apartments, promising us engagement rings and breaking our hearts. I mean, environments, obviously. So their leaders are your 4 easy steps. The lingo, the animals, the important words of Donald Dump, and the earth. LATE for short. So, in essence, saving the earth, well, it's a little late. Finally, let us make a toast to faking it until we make it, to the myths of global warming and air pollution. Also, please don't forget to collect your complimentary gas masks and oxygen tanks on the way out. I hope you survive. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the next competitor, Mark, to deliver their speech.
Ready? Friends, Mithrons, welcome to the inaugural dinner of the exclusive Strongman Club for Authoritarian Presidents and Executives, ESCAPE. Escape. It's what all your citizens should be doing right now, if you've been performing your job half as good as I have. I'm your host, the Honorable Mr. Modi from India, and it is your greatest honor for me to be here. We have spent a frightening amount on social media facilitating fallacious facts. So tonight's dinner was only a plate of rice and jerk chicken. Since we're jerks, but our citizens are too chicken to do anything about it. But never mind that. We are gathered here today to celebrate the rise of strongman politics, a system where our citizens elect us and then proceed to hate their decision when they are deprived of justice, equality, and human rights. And it is awesome! I mean, all of the extraordinary strongmen in the world are gathered here today. We have the chairman of the People's Republic of China, or as I like to call it, the Person's Republic of China, because it clearly belongs to the great Mr. Xi, leader for life. We have Vlad, the master of time management. He is able to suppress the free speech of his people, hate on sexual minorities, shoot down passenger planes, all while wrestling a bear and taking a bare-chested vacation in Siberia. And we have the strong men wannabes. We have Mr. Erdogan from Turkey, Mr. Bolsonaro, Brazil, and Mr. Orban, Hungary. The country, guys, not the state of our citizens. And the elephant in the room, an architect, a cat lover, the peddler of perfidy, good old Donald. Things haven't been going well for you, have they? Amateur. You see, last November, those pesky Democrats seized control of the House of Representatives by taking advantage of anti-Trump anger. Oh, Donald, you must learn from the rest of us. In China, when someone says something against the glorious Mr. Xi, that person disappears. In Russia, Vlad gets you poisoned. And in the Philippines, Mr. Duterte takes you out. You, your Tinder profile, gone. But in the USA, land of the free, you have these social justice warriors who will bash you on Twitter, then return to eating 2-day-old Chinese takeout in their mother's basement. Brothers, this newfound love for social justice is spreading like wildfire, And we have to address it before our citizens lose faith in the strong man way. For our legacy to continue, we have to rekindle the flame that burnt inside our people. Hold your horses, Bolsonaro. We won't literally burn them. And to do this, you have to go back to basics. First, show your people, again, who is boss. Second, obliterate your pesky opponents. And third, manage your meddling, maddening media. Friends, follow these 3 golden rules, and you'll be set for a lifetime of democracy. So first, let's remind them who's boss. Internally, show all your military power. Just look in North Korea. Kim, you little rocket man. He does a fine job of organizing military parades with grand displays of his cavalry and soldiers who march like their lives depend on it. They do. His citizens see his big, beautiful ballistic bombs, and should they choose to step out of line, he can lob those babies at them anytime. Externally, secure your borders. There's no better example of this than in America. Donald's idea about building a big, fat, beautiful wall is so impressive. Why? Because it made all hombres bad. But to all the Mexicans out there worrying about the wall, I say, don't worry, you'll get over it. Now on to our opponents. I know that not all of us have opponents. Looking at you, Poots. But for those of you who aren't that lucky, I'm offering you a life hack for opponent elimination. To put it simply, we must work together. As grotesque as that sounds, we are our best hope. Donald, no collusion, we get it. But without Vlad, you'd be in your golden tower. Maybe in a golden shower. And then we'd have Hillary. Finally, control the media. These troublesome upholders of free information pretend to care about the truth, but they just want to earn a quick buck. My solution? We make them tools that we can use to our advantage. If they want clickbait, we give it to them. Picture this. Justin Trudeau forgets to say sorry. Beautiful, isn't it? If they want news, we'll give them Pizzagate and Hillary's emails. But if they really want the truth, we'll send them to the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey, where MBS will do a smashing good job taking care of them. So strongmen, with these simple techniques, your selfish, self-centered, and short-sighted citizens will remain forever submissive, and they'll all be united shouting, "Escape!" God bless you all, and may the farce be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, competitors and judges. I now declare the after-dinner speaking to be concluded.
Our next category is debate. The competitors are Andre Komlosen-Pop, Joshua Bayrick, Rohan Naidu, and Max Zhu. Our judges today are Rhonda Allen, Lynette Hockey, Mai Tan Mack, Christopher Ostrowski, and Stephanie Sinclair. Our timer is Vicky, and I, Nina, am your moderator. In this room, we will be hearing a debate. Contestants will work with a partner from a different school to propose and second, or oppose and second, a resolution. The resolution was presented to the teams approximately 30 minutes before the start of the debate. Each side will present 2 constructive speeches each and conclude their case with a rebuttal. During the rebuttal speeches, no new constructive arguments may be presented, except in direct refutation to one of the other side's arguments. The debate will come to order. The resolution before the House today is: this House would revoke the citizenship of Western citizens who travel or have traveled to the Middle East to join jihadi groups. Representing the proposition are the first proposition speaker, Joshua Bayrick, and the second proposition speaker, Andre Comleson-Pop. Representing the opposition are the opposition first speaker, Rohan Nadu, and the second opposition speaker, Max Zhu. I now call upon the first speaker to introduce the proposition case.
Honorable judges, the resolution that we are here to debate before the House is that this House would revoke the citizenship of Western citizens who travel or have traveled to the Middle East to join known terrorist groups. I would like to begin this debate by first outlining the rationale and the opening framework of the government's case, then move into our definitions of terms, and then answer two main questions. What does it mean to be a citizen? And as far as crime is concerned, what separates joining a known terrorist group from any other crime? And finally, our closing arguments as to why the motion of the government must prevail in this debate before the House. Now, to move into the definition of terms, we have defined this House as all Western liberal democracies, and we have defined travel to as any individual who has gone to the Middle East with one exception, kidnapping, going against one's will. We've also changed slightly the wording of the resolution because the word jihadi comes from an Islamophobic trope. We will instead be using the word terrorist group in reference to this motion. Now, the rationale of the government's case is that we as the government stand in firm belief that the revocation of citizenship of known terrorists is not only wise, but necessary to safeguard Western nations from more terror and death. Now, the first question the government must answer today is, what does it mean to truly be a citizen? Now, across the world, different nations have attempted to answer this question. For some, it's a matter of blood. It's a matter of genetics. You are a citizen because you are genetically a member of the country. For others, it's because of your location of birth. For some, it's passing a rigorous exam, and for others, it's an unfair and demeaning process, the choice about who gets to be a citizen. However, there is one commonality in all of these different definitions across all of these many nations. You are all in membership to your host country. Throughout the European Union, North America, and almost all other nations, citizens have a righteous ability to criticize their governments. Free speech is an unalienable right that this government, of course, supports. Every citizen is, in fact, protected to ensure their right to be an individual, to express themselves how they see fit. Citizenship is a badge of honor, a stamp of security to every individual that tells them that their host countries are there for them and to protect them. Citizenship allows families to be reunited, and citizenship in many aspects is akin to a committed relationship with your host nation. However, there are limits to this relationship when you willfully engage with groups that seek its very destruction. I myself, as a Muslim American, have feared of having my citizenship revoked following the terror attacks of 9/11. However, the motion that the government presents before the House today is not a motion of profiling and senseless discrimination. It is a motion of empirical justice to ensure that every individual that travels to the Middle East to join a known terror cell is punished in the right regard. Now, this also begs another question. Why treat this question differently not at this time? Why treat this question differently? What is the danger of traveling, particularly to the Middle East, and joining a known terrorist network that merits the revocation of citizenship when no other crime merits the said punishment? Of course, this is going to be an argument of the opposition. And this is not to say that there are not terror groups that exist domestically. Of course, there are white supremacist terrorist groups that exist all across the world. And of course, there are domestic terrorist groups that also seek our destruction. But this motion is a necessary step forward to ensure that one known hotbed of terror networks and radicalization is protected, and we ensure that none of our citizens who travel to these nations are going to return as a terrorist. Now, traveling to the Middle East with a clear and provable intention to aid, abet, or do harm yourself is an inexcusable crime. There is not a single person in the auditorium today that cannot speak to the emotional terror that is garnered by allowing terrorist groups to go free in this world. Now, the opposition has a challenge before them. They have to look at the people of France, the people of the United States, the people of Canada, every single person in this room in the eye, and to tell them that the very same people that seek to kill their family, harm their friends, surmount an insurrection against the countries that have protected them are the very same people that they are going to bait so harshly today to protect. Yes?
Do you really believe even all this radicalization are solely culpable? Nothing else they radicalize?
Oh, of course they are not the only people who are solely culpable. But removing their citizenship is a necessary step that must be taken to ensure that none of this happens again. The opposition is going to argue that there are no limits on what it means to be a citizen. But at best, this logic is foolish, and at worst, it creates danger. Now today, we present a motion that gives you a clear solution on how to fix this problem, or at least take steps to get there. And it is for these reasons that I am so proud to support the motion before the House today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, terrorists are not evil. Their actions are, and we completely condemn those on our side of the House. But them themselves as people, they're not naturally evil. They're people who are radicalized, people who were tricked. On our side of the House, we show compassion. We show that we care more about these people than ISIS does. We care about their lives, not all those terrorist organizations. Throughout my speech today, I'm going to be talking about why these terrorists are not morally culpable, why we need to help them. And my second speaker will be talking about the safety ramifications in this debate. So let's get into some rebuttal here. They come up here and they tell us that what being a citizen is about your country always being there for you. Ladies and gentlemen, we could not agree more. When you are radicalized, when you are put in that situation, your country needs to be there for you. But then they tell us that sometimes you go too far and you need to face justice. I'll be talking about this later in my speech, but just to give you a hint, we tell these people are not morally culpable because they've been radicalized by other people. Then lastly, they tell us about safety, about how they never want a returning terrorist. So my second speaker is going to talk about safety in his speech. But first of all, we tell you that they're not going to just come here and radicalize everyone. Of course, they will be monitored, and then we're not going to treat them terribly either. But we will find out if they start radicalizing a lot of people. That just won't happen. So let's get into some positive matter here. Firstly, onto moral culpability. When prepping for this debate, they told us that the only thing that could not be mentioned is whether people who are kidnapped or abducted, like the girls who were kidnapped by Boko Haram. They said, and I quote, "They have done nothing wrong, so they should be allowed back into their country. They should not be punished." Ladies and gentlemen, this makes this debate very, very interesting because they're essentially saying that if you aren't morally culpable, you need to be allowed back. That is their thinking, and we could not agree more. So let me prove now why these people are not morally culpable. And to do this, we need to talk about determinism. Essentially, that is the idea that all of your actions are the result of all your past experiences, experiences that you could not control. Ladies and gentlemen, I am standing here because my parents encouraged me to do public speaking, because my brother did it and he did well, and I thought I could do that too. And I thought this would look good in a university application. That's why I'm here. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here because of my past experiences. And essentially what I'm saying is that I don't have free will, and nor do any of you. Now, I know that's a hard thing to think about, and I know that determinism is a very abstract philosophical concept. So to explain this a bit better, let's talk about how these people are actually radicalized. So let's make this clear. The people who are radicalized are people who've experienced some pretty hectic racism in their lives. They're people who are very, very angry. And we're sorry that they experienced all that racism. Ladies and gentlemen, I could not make this point any more clear. We live in a very, very racist world, a very, very Islamophobic world. And I'm sure Joshua, as someone who is Muslim, has experienced some of that Islamophobia, and we are sorry about it. We cannot blame these people for being angry. But we must also realize that these are people who are also in this situation because they were targeted, because they were poor, the people who lost their loved ones. They were people who were desperate. And when someone from a terrorist organization comes up to you and says, we're going to give you a sense of belonging, we're going to look after you, give you friends and family, it is so easy to be tricked. So I'm hoping you're starting to see the big picture here. It's not their fault. They are people who were put in a terrible situation, and they were people who were tricked. I'll take you in a moment. So let's talk about what justice is actually about. Because we tell you justice is not just about punishing people. Because the ideas of determinism can be applied to any crime. Justice is about, firstly, keeping our society safe by locking up people who are dangerous, and secondly, by having a deterrent. So firstly, onto safety. That's something my second speaker is going to be talking about, but when we tell you that when we show some compassion, we say we are going to care about you, we have a safer world where less people are radicalized. But moreover, we also tell you that these people will be monitored, and they're not just going to be able to come back and commit heinous acts right here. And then onto deterrence, we're telling you that you cannot have a deterrent for something like this. Because when these people leave, they are so incredibly radicalized, they're willing to give up their lives. Deterrence is not something we're talking about in this debate. Yeah.
Is the opposition categorically wrong? Any terrorist individual might have been coerced into his actions.
Cool. We'll take the hotline here. Yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen. These are people who were put in such terrible situations, and they were tricked into becoming these terrible people. We are not condoning their actions. Their actions are awful. But we cannot punish them as people. We need to give them a second chance. We need to have some compassion. So the last issue here is, can we trust these people? Can they reintegrate into our societies? And we tell you, yes, they can. Because when they go overseas and they live those lives, they live terrible lives, lives where they see their friends dying every single day in front of them. And when they see that, you lose your conviction like that. Ladies and gentlemen, we also tell you that when the West shows some compassion, shows that they care, people are less likely to get radicalized in the first place. The example I can give you is of a UK woman who recently wanted to come back to the UK. She was told she couldn't, but she just had a baby and she wanted to give her baby a better life. The UK said no, that baby is now dead. Ladies and gentlemen, if you stand with what justice is really about, if you believe in second chances, and if you understand how easily people can be manipulated, you have to stand with the opposition. Thank you so very much.
I thank the member for their remarks. I now call upon the second speaker of the proposition.
The opposition has one central burden in this debate, one central question to answer. Why is the risk of lives being lost, of people being killed or maimed because of returning terrorists, less important than some abstract notion of compassion?
We do not understand why it is not more just for the state to do its utmost to protect the lives of law-abiding citizens, why it has a greater responsibility to people who have willfully renounced everything the state stands for by joining a group whose very purpose is the elimination of that nation. Because they have not answered that, we are very unclear as to how they can prevail. But even more importantly, they have not given us a clear alternative as to what they would want as a deterrent. From Rohan's speech, as much as I can gather, they would prefer almost essential amnesty. There will be monitoring, but at the end of the day, your status is unchanged. In my speech, I will first go through thorough refutation of what you've heard from the opposition, and then rebuild my partner Joshua's excellently made points that have not received sufficient response. And finally, I'll explain to you, especially in the context of amnesty, how we will increase Islamophobia in Western liberal democracies. So now, let's get into refutation of what you heard from the opposition. They give you a very unnuanced and false characterization of who these individuals are. They tell you that they were tricked. I'm sorry, but it's not as simple as you teleporting the second you see a jihadi ad to Syria. You need to buy a plane ticket. You need to get on that plane. You need to say your goodbyes to the family. At every single point, you have a choice. And at every single point, you make the choice to betray your nation, to join a group whose very purpose is to kill as many as your fellow countrymen as possible. But even in the cases where you were tricked, at the end of the day, the facts remain. You joined these groups. And in our system of justice, it is the facts that count. Did you or did you not take steps to put the lives of your fellow countrymen in danger? It is abundantly clear that you did. That deals largely with their notion of how they are not morally culpable. But let's talk about the example of Shamima Begum, the UK citizen who now wants to return. In multiple televised interviews, she has said she does not regret her decision. Despite being an enforcer for ISIS, killing Syrians, she does not have any remorse. Why do we need to let these people back into our nations where they can spread hate and increase bloodshed? We need a response from the opposition. Secondly, they talk to you about a question of justice, how compassion leads to less radicalization. I'm very sorry, but amnesty for such a serious crime is unacceptable. At the very least, they should have been able to say something like, at least we'll imprison them because they have committed a crime. But they've pushed themselves into a very hard stance of amnesty. That's the stance they have to defend. But we are unwilling, even if there is a chance that compassion leads to less further radicalization and increased integration, to accept the risk of more lives lost. Because it is almost impossible to ascertain with certainty what the motivations of returning terrorists are. Like Shamima Begum, she lied repeatedly in interviews about wanting to come back and be a good citizen until it was revealed the heinous actions and ideologies that she held. Because it is almost impossible to know what their actions will look like when they return to our nations, we cannot accept that as a compromise. Because the lives of law-abiding citizens, people who have committed no wrong, should not be put at risk for some hope of reintegration or less radicalization. And they never actually analyzed essentially why compassion leads to less radicalization. Do citizens simply feel like the state has their back? Well, what about the actions of the state to combat racism? What about the actions of the state in the years preceding their departure to provide them with education, health, security? How is that not just as compassionate as allowing them to return with no punishment? It is clear that the state has been compassionate and they have still taken these steps. I'll take you, Max.
Oh, thank you. If this woman was allowed to return and she then committed a hate crime, she would then be in prison. The actual comparative in this debate is if that woman stayed in Syria and was further radicalized as a last stand.
If that woman stays in Syria, she cannot commit attacks in the UK. That is what we're willing to support, and that's what we're okay with. Even if it means that they grow into further radicalization, at least they have almost zero ability to come back and commit attacks on home soil, and we prefer that on our side of the house. So now let's get into rebuilding. We didn't hear much response from them, besides the fact that essentially these people were not morally culpable. Let me reiterate. In some very isolated cases, there was an element of deceit and trickery. But even in those instances, citizens equipped with critical thought knowing the abundance of evidence as to what ISIS and Al-Qaeda are, what they do, and what the punishment is, they were still willing to make that decision, to take that choice to join them. So even if there was an initial element of trickery, at the end of the day, the decision was a willful one. But we'd like to reiterate that in the vast majority of cases, it is a decision undertaken freely. They never actually gave us a response as to my partner's excellent analysis about how we cannot accept an atmosphere of terror in our Western liberal democracies. Because make no mistake, that is what happens. When terrorists are able to return with little to no restrictions on their activity or place in society, terror is exactly what you will get. You will get citizens who fear for their very lives moving about in a city because the state has not taken adequate steps to protect them. And if the state was unable to tell in the first place when they were able to be radicalized, if they were not able with their sophisticated monitoring to be able to predict that they would go to Syria, how are they now going to be able to predict when they will commit a crime? The capabilities of the state to predict that type of behavior were equal before and after the fact. There's no indication, and we need to hear a response to them as to how the state will be adequately able to prevent further attacks happening, even with their mechanism of monitoring. So now, let's move on to the proposition's final contention in this debate, how we affect Islamophobia. There's two parts to this. First, let me explain how with taking a measure such as revocation of citizenship, you actually decrease Islamophobic sentiment. Recognize that a lot of Islam rhetoric is framed in terms of security. Many leaders like Marine Le Pen, Donald Trump, and even Canadian politicians like Maxime Bernier say there's taking these steps, such as travel bans or restrictions on the movement of Muslims, to protect their citizens. When the state, when a government gives you a tough prohibition on what the lives of jihadis look like, when they say they're not going to be allowed to return into our country, all of that rhetoric about fear is sapped of its venom. Because now the state has shown unequivocally that it is not willing to put the lives of its citizens in danger. So we will see less Islamophobia. We will see better lives for citizens in Western liberal democracies. But actually, let's analyze what happens when any other measure is taken except revocation of citizenship. And I'm not even going to engage with amnesty. I'm going to take a higher bar. Why is even something like imprisonment not what we can support? The vast majority of radicalizations happens in prisons. For example, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the founder of ISIS, was radicalized in an American prison. Even if you allow people to return and put them in prison, there is still going to be an atmosphere created knowing the patterns of radicalization. And that's not even to talk about amnesty, when there's no restrictions, when literally any person you see on the street could be a returned terrorist. That's when you see more hate crimes on Muslims. That's when you see more difficulties to the reintegration of refugees or people who have returned from foreign countries having committed no wrongs. That's when you see more prejudice against prisoners. At the end of the day, we think the responsibility of the state is primarily to those citizens who have committed no wrong and who will be subject to increased hate. Even if there is a harm to the people who are not allowed to return on our side of the house, we are willing to accept that trade-off because we guarantee better lives and less hate for citizens right now in our countries. Judges, you have a choice between two worlds. A world in which crimes are adequately punished. A world in which the state fulfills its obligation to security. Or a world in which we stand by idly, waiting for the ticking time bomb of another attack and of more lives lost. That's not a world we're willing to accept. Thank you.
I thank the member for their remarks. The second opposition will now deliver the last speech opposing the case.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What goes through someone's mind when they are radicalized, and what by definition is radicalization? Recognize that there are a couple of truths in today's debate. First of all, it's that radicalization is inherently a rejection of citizenship values. That is true. But here's the difference that we see on side opposition. In the initial phase of someone who's being radicalized, frequently it is a notion of extremes. It is the evil values of the nation that you're pitted against, which has left you behind, versus the ideals of a nation of an ideal that you might want to join and you might want to fight for. But here is the problem. Once these people have actually returned or want to return, they face this idea. They are done fighting. Because if you have been radicalized to the extent that you are willing to go out and to fight and to kill, and then you want to return home, what this says is that you reject the ideals that you left for. You tell yourself, no, that's not what this is about. I'm done, I'm out. There are two situations in today's debate. First of all, in which you have people who are already domestically at home. Second of all, you have people who are abroad and want to return home. I'm going to be dealing in both of these cases, taking the exact burden that Andre wanted me to take, which is coincidentally the same burden I had for him, and proving to you why we win that distinctively under our side. Let's get into this very first idea under my constructive argument about renewed radicalization. Recognize there's two scenarios, as I said earlier: abroad and you want to return home. Second, you are already home. If you are someone who wants to come home, that means you reject the values previously before. You've seen the horrors of it and you want no more part of it. You are done. But even in that situation, as you'll see in my at-home example, you are still fearful. You don't know what the future will bring, and you could very easily be pushed back to that if you feel that your government, the nation that you now have chosen to rejoin, has betrayed you. Let's deal first with if you are abroad and you want to return home. Let's take an example, for example, of someone who's fleeing the collapse of ISIS. If you want to return home and you are denied that, that tells you there is no future of peace. Your past is dead. There is no hope of you ever regaining your previous life. There is no hope of you ever living in a way without conflict. What this forces you to do is to continue to fight, to make a last stand. Your only choice at that point is to stay with the organization that you were previously at, because it is a choice that these people make. And if you take away the choice of going home and living in peace, the only option they have left is to turn to the organization they currently want to escape for, to fight for their survival. Go ahead.
At the end of the day, there is no way to adequately assess how radicalized...
Thank you, I get that. I have explicit refutation for that later. I'll deal with that now. Here is specifically why. Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, has explicitly said in interviews the reason why terrorists who return to the terrorists who are radicalized in the UK go abroad is because they don't have literally enough manpower and resources. The net is too wide. Now specifically that we know which individuals we should watch and we can watch, it's going to be significantly easier, significantly better to do that. Sorry we've done early, it's just debate partners we think on the same wavelength. Here, let's talk about in the second idea about you being already home. If you are someone in Canada or the United Kingdom who is already home and your nation says, we are stripping away your citizenship, you are not a part of us, we detest you and every single part of you, your sacrifice of coming back, your renewed sense of conscience is all invalidated, what is that person then going to do? Willingly come to you, begging you to cuff them and put them into prison? They are going to go, ladies and gentlemen, out in a blaze of supposed glory. And their fragile and fragmented mental state, when they face the invalidation of what they've chosen to do with the rest of their lives, what they're going to do is quite probably commit another terrorist attack or seek to rejoin the terrorist group that they're coming from, or seek to radicalize others. This is a game of incentives, ladies and gentlemen. And moving into the future, how can we prevent the most terrorist attacks and save the most lives? Let's go into refutation and rebuilding, seeing if I can find the papers that I need to. Let's deal with this fundamental idea that we got from the opening speaker, essentially about how terrorism is terrorism. The nations, if you decide to rejoin, you are like taking away everything that the nation has previously stood for. This is outweighed if we can bring to you and win on the idea in the case that you are going to get less terrorism in the long term. Because recognize that taking away someone's citizenship as a threat, as a deterrence, does not work. Because in the initial phase of someone's radicalization, the very reason they were willing to leave in the first place is a rejection of those values. And that, of course, is no longer the case. Let's deal explicitly with this UK example. Here's the thing. If that woman was allowed to return, and if people like them are allowed to return, and continue in the worst case scenario for us to seek to spread hate, to seek to radicalize, we have hate crime laws, we have laws about radicalization with which these people can be arrested for. Now that we know explicitly who they are, it is very, very easy to watch them and to monitor them. The comparative in this debate is if that woman, if these thousands of people remain in Syria, killing the soldiers that we send there to help stop this mess, destroying ancient burial sites, and killing Syrians, for example, which we would contest to you is equally bad as if they decided to go out and kill Britons. More lives are lost under their side of the house. So fundamentally, we see that if you accept the very burden that Andre came to you to speak to you about today, you must side with us. Because if you taking away citizenship has no actual effect on radicalization, has no actual effect on saving lives, both of the cases here today, as by Andre's measure, are pointless. Let's deal explicitly with the content that we heard from Joshua, talking to you about how, look, this is a game essentially of morals and about rights. If you've committed a crime, we think you deserve, like, second chance or whatever. You don't deserve to have that, and you shouldn't be allowed to come back. At the end of the day, you should weigh that against the literal potential to have less victims. We stand for a world in which, yes, perhaps you have some victims who don't have a sense of justice, or some people feel as if the government is being unfair. But in the comparative, you have more literal lives saved. You have less victims who in the future will perhaps be feeling bad. This is the fundamental trade-off under today's debate. We would tell you, as in the actual justice system, we should be focused on preventing future terrorism, which I've proven in my speech to you is fundamentally prevented and at least neutered quite substantially if you decide to not revoke these people's citizenship. Because in the very worst case scenario for our side, you are able to pick them off the street and arrest them. In the best case scenario, you can reduce all of the harms that both sides in here today don't want. Let's deal very explicitly with Andre's content about Islamophobia and that idea in today's debate. What do you think is more radicalizing? Seeing continuous terror attacks despite everything your government has done, killing you and your fellow Britons or Canadians, or knowing that among you initially walk a few, perhaps like people who have been allowed to come back from Syria, and noticing that these people haven't actually done anything. Because let's recognize the characterization again about someone who has come back. If you come back, you are saying substantially, I made a life choice in which I chose to reject my initial values and go fight for others. I was wrong. I am now going to come back and accept the initial ones because they've stood the test of time, and through all the suffering that I've been through, they're better. In that situation, under our side, in a good case, what you're going to have is people who do not want to spread further hate, do not want to further radicalize people. But in the worst case, in which you have some people who are returned and who are radicalized, it is much easier to pick them off the street, stop them from spreading harm, than if they were a sea away in Syria, killing the very soldiers that we send there to protect the Syrian citizens and killing people whose lives we think are worth an equal amount. This debate today is inherently about trade-offs, because if this resolution has no effect, no thank you, then there's no point for us debating today. The metric by which both Andre and ourselves have chosen to measure this debate is about lives saved. So the question initially that we should ask, as I've explained in this debate, is which resolution is most likely to prevent further lives lost? What we need to hear from the opposition government reply speaker is a comprehensive account about why removing citizenship specifically is going to either serve as a deterrent to prevent more people from going, or by some miraculous nature, be a better way to prevent citizens from committing terror attacks than even the worst case scenario that we've given to you here today on side opposition. Now, let's get into some final notes. Even if you don't accept that preventing future terrorism and saving lives is the most important thing in today's debate, why do we still win? On the idea of Islamophobia, in the long term, when you see that people in your community who have returned are living normal lives, are living with you, there's no harm done. You have less radicalization than if you had further terror attacks. If you want to engage in the debate about determinism, I first tell you it's too early in the morning to talk about Hegel and Kant, but furthermore, that at the very worst case scenario, it is a wash. So you're left with the fundamental idea of that trade-off of which I keep yammering on and on about. Which side in today's resolution is most likely going to give you more lives saved? Stand with side opposition, stand with amnesty.
I thank the members for their remarks. At this time, the first speaker for each side will deliver a 3-minute summary and rebuttal speech. A 1-minute break will be allowed while the members prepare these speeches. No new information may be introduced during these speeches. We will now start with the first opposition speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this debate, we've given you a much better description of how people are radicalized. Ladies and gentlemen, as an Indian who lives in South Africa, a country that cares a lot about race, I've experienced racism and I've been very angry. And I'm so grateful that no one's been there to make me any more angry, any more radicalized. Ladies and gentlemen, they tell you on their side of the house that some people were tricked into this. Others, they're just evil. What they're essentially telling you is that some people are just born terrorists. It's an insane idea which you cannot believe. Ladies and gentlemen, these people are always radicalized by others. We also want to make another thing very, very clear. We did not tell you that they're just going to come to the West and run around as normal citizens. They can still be given some punishments, they can still be monitored, they could still be put in prison, they could still face a whole other bunch of ramifications. Because in my analysis about justice, we told you that we don't punish people because they're morally culpable, we punish people to keep everyone else safe. And on our side of the house, we tell you that having them here is just a whole lot safer, because they can't get any more radicalized, they can't commit any other crimes. Because here, we can monitor them. Here, we can stop these attacks from happening again. So now, onto safety. They tell us two things. Firstly, we don't give a good enough deterrence, and secondly, these people are going to be radicalized here and just commit more crimes here. So firstly, in deterrence, we told you that deterrence is not a big issue here. Saying you can't come back to this country is not a big enough deterrence to stop people from going overseas. When you leave, you are so incredibly radicalized, you literally are willing to give your life for your cause. Deterrence is not a big issue in this debate. But then next, they told you that if they come here, they'll commit a whole bunch of crimes. They do not give their government enough credit. Your government knows what you're doing. They will know if you're plotting against them or if you're radicalizing a large group of people. That just won't happen. What essentially happens under our model is we don't have to catch the bad guys. The bad guys come to us. They're under our control. We can stop these attacks from happening again. Then it's a moral culpability. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand this is a very, very difficult thing to come to terms with. These attacks are horrible. Many, many people lose their lives. It's a very emotional issue, and I'm sure quite a few people in this room don't like me very much for backing these people up. But if you follow the logic, if you understand how these people are radicalized, how they're so desperate, and they're promised a better life, you will understand that you have to side with the opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, these people are not morally culpable. These people were tricked. And then lastly, onto reintegration, they tell you they just can't reintegrate. We tell you they can. The sign that they want to come back to this country, that they no longer want to be a part of those terrorist organizations, is already a sign. But after that, we tell you that when your country shows some compassion, says, we want you back, we want to make your life better, they are more likely to reintegrate. But even if they don't reintegrate, we can stop them from committing more crimes here, but we can also stop them from being further radicalized. Ladies and gentlemen, if you care about what justice is really about, and you want to show that we as the West care more about these people's lives than ISIS or any other terrorist organization, you have to side with the opposition. Thank you so much.
We will now hear the proposition's final summary and rebuttal to be delivered by the first proposition speaker.
Honorable judges, I could not be more proud to conclude this debate for the government. Because before the House today, the opposition has asked one big question: which resolution is going to save more lives? And to support their own case, they've presented an allegedly compassionate call to think about the humanity of the terrorists who have done so much. Yet the government would like to ask one central question: at what cost? This debate has been playing with human lives since it first began. They say that people who are tricked and people who are coerced are not morally culpable in what they do. But this is a fatal error in the logic of the opposition. They have told an almost convincing story of the plight of how allegedly difficult it is to be a terrorist. They have talked about how their compassion, of course, extends to these people who seek to harm us. But is that where their compassion ends? They have told sob stories of the problems terrorists face. But the government can tell plenty of sad stories of our own. We can talk about the wife who lost her husband in the shooting at the Bataclan. We can talk about the mother who lost her child in Nice, who was run over. We can also talk about the fact that the Parisian terrorists were coerced into their actions, that Abu Musa Barzaqawi, the founder of ISIS, was also coerced into his actions, that logically all criminals, under the logic of the opposition, are coerced into their actions. Murderers are victims to their emotions. Thieves are often victims to their circumstance, but does this mean they do not deserve justice? The case that the government would like to present today is a case that offers justice to individuals based on their actions, not about how difficult it has been for them to be where they are, but instead about what terror they have given the world. Now, the opposition has asked, aren't they going to commit another attack if they're not allowed to return? Aren't they going to be mad if their citizenship is revoked? But how does this logic hold up? Should we not punish people for fear that they will resent their host country? Should we not administer justice out of some sort of paranoia that these people are going to commit another attack? Or are we instead going to ensure that justice is always carried out? The case the government presents today is a case of justice that rectifies and attempts to fix the issues that these people are trying to create in our host countries. Revoking citizenship is a natural and logical measure to attempt to protect our own nations. And it is only from a place of security at home that we can ever hope to save others in other countries. And it is for all of these reasons that I am so proud to present the resolution of the government today. Thank you.
Amazing. Can we have one more huge round of applause for all the grand finalists? All right, thanks everyone. This is really special every year. Those were tremendous speeches, definitely. Just going to tell you about, the final details as we head into our final time all together later tonight. So right now it's 4:33, or depending on your watch, just after 4:30. The next and basically final event for all of us at Worlds 2019 will be our final speaker back at Branksome Hall, and then the closing dinner. So I'm not going to speak for long. I realize we've been here listening to many speeches, and mine is a great disappointment after what we've just heard. But some details. Chrystia Freeland, our speaker, is really a significant speaker for us to have the honor of seeing tonight. Writer and politician and journalist. She's the current Minister of Foreign Affairs for Canada. We're even this morning, we didn't know for sure if she'd be here because you never know what will happen in the world, but we are going to hear from Ms. Freeland. I say all this to just emphasize the importance of the timing of the event. The doors open at Branksome at 5:30, and we need to be seated by 6:30. So that's a big window there, but 6:30 it begins. So, we have time. If you go back to the hotel now and straight on to school, you get there by 5:30. If you're there by 6, that's perfectly fine. But I just want you to know, 5:30 the doors open, 6:30 we're in seats. And these lanyards become very important because they are the tickets for the event. And it is a ticketed event, so those of you who are part of Worlds 2019, here you have tickets to the event. There are other people who will be at the event. There'll be hundreds, really, and they'll all have reserved their tickets in advance. So make sure that you have your lanyard. I mean, if you've lost it and you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I do know who you are and I can get you in, but it will be not super convenient if there are many of you in that situation. So please bring your lanyard, and I think that's really all I have to say about that. If you have any trouble getting back to the school, please ask one of the organizers and we'll remind you about the various options available to you. But doors at 5:30, bums and seats at 6:30. Thanks so much.